Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, Anasana. As always, it's a pleasure to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio. As you heard in the introduction, this is the podcast dedicated to preserving the history and raising the profile of fraternal organizations everywhere. This is another one of those segments that I'm really looking forward to bringing you because we are going to be shedding some light on an organization. I have featured similar organizations before, but not this one, and I don't think anything as deep as this particular organization as well. That organization is the Egyptian Masonic Order of the United Kingdom. I don't know a whole lot about them, okay? But I will offer you what I have. The Egyptian Masonic Order is as it said, a Masonic organization within progressive or universal Masonry, or it's also known as Continental Freemasonry. Egyptian Masonic Order of the United Kingdom describe themselves as an independent fraternal organization offering liberal Masonic initiation and education, Hermetic and esoteric study, as well as spiritual self-development. They are a non-religious, non-sectarian organization. Another way they describe themselves is a new order in an ancient tradition. That sounds very interesting, right? Now, I had a lengthy conversation very early this morning at about 2 to 3 a.m. my time. So that goes to show you the lengths I go to bring you Points of Light Radio, okay? This particular gentleman I'm going to be interviewing today, I had this long conversation with him. This sounds, like I said, a very deep organization. So as you watch this particular segment, as you listen to it, I want you to use your spiritual discernment. You've heard me say this about other fraternal organizations that I've covered. Use your spiritual discernment. Some things have to be spiritually discerned. We can't just view them through the prism of our minds. We need to use spiritual discernment when looking at them. So I encourage you to do that. And without any further discussion from myself or introduction from me, I'm going to bring you this gentleman that I spoke to earlier this morning named Darren Rose. He is the Grand Master and Grand Hierophant of the Egyptian Masonic Order of the United Kingdom. Let's have him shed some light on this lovely organization. But are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? Trim your lamps, get your spiritual discernment ready, and follow me. Mr. Rose, welcome to Points of Light Radio.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
First of all, tell my listeners and viewers about yourself.
Okay, my name is Darren Rose. I'm currently acting as the Grand Master for the Egyptian Masonic Order UK, which is a new order in the old tradition of the ancient and primitive rites of Memphis, Mizraim. And we just started in London. We've been going for about 3 years. We're still quite small, but we're opening up in various places in other countries. And our form of masonry is often termed Hermetic or esoteric masonry.
How long have you been a Mason?
I was raised in the United Grand Lodge of England as a Master Mason in, I believe, 2008.
Okay.
Long before that, I was a student of various mystery traditions. I started very young. It's a tradition in my family as well, so I was raised in that kind of practice. And one thing led me to another. I was always interested in Freemasonry. I have Masons in my family. And my father was never really interested in it, but he was always saying, you might enjoy it. And one day, by chance, I was working in Watkins Bookshop in London, and I met Martin Folks, and he said, have you considered Freemasonry? I said, I've considered it. And one thing led to another, and I was introduced to some wonderful brethren, and I started there.
Okay, and now like I said, we talked earlier. Tell us about the Egyptian Masonic Order of the UK. It's such a deep organization. I just want you to tell my listeners and viewers about it. I'll just, let you talk here. I said that before.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we spoke before, and as I said, I often overshare. Essentially, our order practices various forms of the Egyptian rite, which is a rite that started nominally in Italy in the 18th century. It has some famous figures that were influential in its beginning, such as Count Cagliostro, the Count Raimondo de Sangro, and the Bedarid brothers. And later on, we have Marconis and various other people. And the rite was unified as Memphis and Mizraim. It used to be two separate rites. It was unified by General Garibaldi in the 1800s, and it started off from there as a joint rite. Some people practice the rites separately, but we practice them together, generally speaking. Our order is a mixed order, so we invite men and women. Although traditionally, Egyptian rite starts from the fourth degree, we also have the first 3 degrees as well. So we admit people who are absolutely new to Masonry, and we can pass them through the degrees from the very beginning. So even if you are a complete novice, you can approach the order, and we will guide you through each stage of the degrees and make you a Mason. Certainly a Mason of Egypt.
So is it recognized? I think you said it's not completely recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England.
It's a strange area because Memphis Mizraim's history has always been very different to that of Anglo Masonry, mainly because Memphis started in the continent, and Anglo Masonry obviously started in the UK in its current form. And the political divisions that existed in the 18th and 19th centuries, I think, caused a certain division. Another division that was caused was the fact that Memphis Mizraim was always a mixed order. It admitted men and women. For a long time, UGLE didn't. So I think it's they went in very divergent paths. But lately, I've noticed that there's a lot of interest in the Egyptian rite from UGLE Masons, simply because of its difference. Because we're so mystical, we work the rite in a way that's similar to the 18th century French rite, in that we include alchemy and theurgy and the study of the subject as part of the degree system. And our masonry is a very old form of masonry, very similar to the older forms of the Scottish rite. So some UGLE Masons are sort of sniffing around going, oh, this is really interesting. And because I am a UGLE Mason, I'm running this order with that culture as my background. It's a very comfortable fit for some of our visitors. So I think we're entering a new phase.
If a guy joined your order off the street, if a man joined could he attend a UGLA, or would they not recognize his first 3 degrees?
I think as it is with many different observances, it depends very much on the lodge. I mean, we certainly, as our constitution goes, we admit anyone from any other observation of Masonry to visit. Other orders are slightly different. Some are more concerned about which brothers are mixing with which. Also, of course, we admit women, so our female members couldn't visit a UGLE lodge, and that's a sort of stumbling block for some of our female members. But as it is with Masonry, there is always a quiet sort of swapping of numbers and mutual visitation. And I think that's wonderful because it helps all the brethren to see the various different forms of Masonry that are available without having to go into any grand acts of fidelity and mutual recognition. It isn't always necessary. I think if we're doing very different forms of Masonry, it's nice that we're able to do things on our own track and develop things as the right demands. But yes, there is a sort of tacit acceptance, I think, that we're doing this, and that we're doing it in a way that's very regular according to how UGLE sees the landmarks. Apart from admitting women, we're very close in terms of how we practice Masonry, with the signs, the passwords, etc. Although our origin is continental, it has a lot in common with the classical Masonry that people know more widely.
Now, I saw on your website there's 4 main aspects that you seem to really push, which is initiation, instruction, progression, and communion. So initiation, of course, you've already talked about that, but instruction now, what sort of instructions and how are these instructions done?
Okay, well, with our order, we have a Masonic and esoteric curriculum. So every time you enter a new degree, you receive a series of lectures, a workbook, which is very practical, and a series of exercises specific to the symbolism of the degree. And this changes with each progression that you make from the first degree upwards. So we have a full curriculum from the first to the 33rd degree, and then a more open research-based curriculum from the 34th degree upwards. So, and when you come in, you're instructed not only on the ritual itself, how to stand, what things mean, what sort of things you're supposed to do, not only physically but mentally. You're also instructed in the symbolism and its origins. So we discuss things like the Hermetic tradition, the alchemical tradition, classical astrology, ideas about psychology and psychism that the order has always traditionally held in its inner sanctum, and that's always discussed and explored. And we also practice theurgical exercises, so people are given rituals to do at home, as well as in the lodge, that will help them to advance their masonry on an esoteric level.
Now, no, but a lot of this instruction is, you talk about books. Are they done online?
Yes.
No, but are they done online? Read online? Is this instruction offered online? Part of it, at least.
It's a mixture. We do instruction. We perform instruction in lodges of instruction in person.
Okay.
So we'll take people through things in a practical way. But there's also an online presence of the order, which is a private set of sites where people are given access according to the level that they're on. And there they'll find all of their information, all of their lessons online. We also do online lessons as well in person. So we do tuition, and that's at least once a month. And there are always very lively discussions where the various senior members of the order will meet with all the people on a particular degree level, and we can go into great detail about how masonry works. So the combination of having online lessons and lessons in person seems to work very well for us.
Progression. Let's talk about that. How's that work?
Oh, well, we have 99 degrees. One would expect progression because of the number. But progression isn't really we're not meaning it in necessarily a political way, I think, in terms of what popular culture assumes, although many of us are humanitarian and progressive in our personal sentiments. What we mean by progression is Masonic progression. So it's progression of the soul and the spirit through the degrees and the rite of masonry. And that progression is encouraged by the rite, which is how it's structured. We often call the rite Jacob's ladder, that you climb one rung at a time and you go progressively towards your divine source, your essence, however you conceive it in your own personal religious view. But of course, there is a collective Masonic spiritual view that all of us sort of adhere to, that the great architect of the universe has set things in a particular order, and that a real order, a real rite, reflects that divine order through various mechanisms and symbols. And so our progression is very much through the degrees, through the levels of consciousness that they're supposed to represent, and the moral and ethical lessons that they teach us.
So, but progression, is there an expectation that you progress at a certain speed, or are you allowed to progress sort of at your own speed? I know some lodges do really push that, okay, it's time for you to move up, or...
I suppose there are many reasons for that, depending on the lodge. Our approach is very much about people feeling ready to take the next step.
Okay.
But we will always encourage people that they will be able to. In practical terms, we ask all of our members to write a lecture based on the degree to show their understanding.
Wow.
We measure their progression in the symbolism. So we ask them questions at the lessons to see how they're comprehending the symbols and whether they're having an effect on their view of the world and how they feel about themselves. And that's a very organic process. So for some people, if they feel to stay in the first 3 degrees and that's enough for them, we certainly won't criticize it. But for those that wish to progress, we'll certainly encourage it.
It's wide open. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Absolutely. And it's for men and women. So and that's a lovely mix too.
Now let's talk about communion. Now this is different. What talk about communion? I've heard of church communion, but what's this kind of communion?
Of course. Well, communion in the literal sense of the word is the act of a community, is people coming together with a common cause or a common goal. For us, when we meet, it is an act of communion. We're all coming together within a lodge. A lodge is actually the body of the people rather than the building in which the lodge meets. And we feel that the real gift of Freemasonry is engaging in something that's very complex and very beautiful as a collection of people that lifts us above the differences that normally separate us and bring us a sense of communion that otherwise wouldn't have been possible on an ordinary level. So, people who join Freemasonry can come from different backgrounds. They can certainly be different genders, different religions, but the communal aspect of Freemasonry brings us all together in a common unity, which is the great architect of the universe, which is the most universal way of seeing divinity as you can. Generally speaking, people do believe that there is something higher than themselves when they come into Freemasonry, but how they define it is always personal. And our communion is really based on an idea that our souls can get together in a place where we're not divided by money or status or the conditions of our life or the phase of our life that we're in, and we can find a common ground and actually share and learn from each other in a safe space. And that's what we mean by communion. And it works. It's beautiful when it happens. Our Friday meeting was incredible. We had music for the first time, really good music, and it just lifted the energy. People coming out, people crying, people who couldn't sleep last night after the meeting. They were buzzing. It was an incredible energy, and there are very few meetings I've been to where that's been the case. But with us, that seems to happen quite frequently. There's a great charge of vitality that comes from doing the rituals, even when people make mistakes, because we don't sort of harangue people if they do, and they gloss over them. They don't make them twice, and so the ritual quality is increasing exponentially, and that's beautiful too. So people feel there's a cycle of validation and confirmation. It just gives them such a buzz. It's amazing. We meet in central London. I won't disclose the location, but it's very central. And we have a lodge room, a very nice lodge room. We have a lovely situation that we're in at the moment. And the brethren meet, and the brothers and sisters always have a wonderful time. And the conversations are incredible in their breadth and depth. And that's what I wanted. That's why I started it.
But where do your other lodges meet? Do they meet in Masonic halls, or do they?
Generally speaking, if the lodges of the order and the rite will meet in Masonic halls, classic Masonic halls, because we use the same symbolism. But it's possible to meet in an ordinary space that's set up for it, as long as it's private, there's a lock on the door, you're not overheard or overlooked. That's always possible too. I mean, the original Masons met in rooms above pubs in central London, and drew things in chalk on the floor. So that's why they say the lodge is not the room, it's the people. But generally our order meets in Masonic lodges that we either hire or we borrow for a time or we rent.
Okay, now part of the plans you have are for the Egyptian Order of the UK to expand further internationally. Now, how is that going?
It's going slowly but surely. I think when it comes to expansion, our intention isn't so much business related. It's more about people loving the rite in the way that we practice it, coming and visiting, seeing all the details we have, and of course the curriculum, which is a rarity, and the quality of the curriculum, the depth of study, that's attracting people to the rite as we practice it. And it's making sure that it's available if people actually want to practice it, even if they're in a different country. Obviously, we're an Anglophone order, so most of our rituals are in English. There is a translation process that we use for brethren who are in other countries, so that's always possible. And our main focus, obviously, is the UK, because we started here. But we don't want to deny our brethren access to the way that we practice the rite and to all the wonderful things that we were able to collect because of the transmissions I was granted and the other things I've been able to find and to be given subsequently. So we have a wonderful collection, a wonderful depth and breadth of tradition. And so I want to make sure that's available for brothers who perhaps are discontent with what they've found so far, or feel they want to explore further other aspects of Masonry that perhaps are not explored in classical Masonry or other obediences.
Now, the one thing I did tell you I wanted to ask about is your books. Now, you've written some books. What are those books, and do you have any plans to write more?
Thank you for mentioning. It's very kind of you. I write under the nom de plume Frate LIL, and the books are available from a site called Divinate.
Okay.
It's Divinate Oracle or Divinate Books. So it's www.divinateoracle.co.uk. You can certainly find us there, or www.divinate.co.uk. We are self-published because the books are very specialist. I write in the Golden Dawn
tradition. That's something you can sell on Amazon, in other words.
Well, I thought about it, but I thought actually, because it's such a specialist subject, that's certainly something that I could do and may do in the future. But I feel that it's for people who are looking for a specific aspect of the tradition. So I didn't feel that it was necessary to commercialize it for the sake of it. And it seems to be selling very well nonetheless. I have some very good feedback from the books, and they are manuals essentially. I don't tend to write books that are academic studies of subjects. I feel there are lots of people who are doing that very well, and I don't feel I need to add to the pile, as it were. My strength is very much in guiding people into how to practicalize the traditions and make them work for them. So my books were always motivated by that. Originally, they started as my own notes when I was progressing through the degrees and the grades of my Hermetic order. And my adept, who was teaching me, said, "These would be really, really useful for the occult community. Why don't you turn them into a book?" And I said, "Really?" my scribblings, and he said, "Yes, your scribblings." So I tabulated them. It was a very hard job. I started with the Enochian tradition from the Golden Dawn perspective. Made a series of 4 books that were workbooks for people to use, and they did very well, and people really enjoy using them. They feel that they fill a gap that's missing in the tradition. So I went on and I did something about the minor arcana of the tarot. Did something about talismanic images, which is a magical technique that's used in the Golden Dawn and various other offshoots of that Hermetic tradition. And I sort of carried on from there. Most of my writing for the past 3 years, though, has been for the order. Mm-hmm. So I've been contributing to the curriculum, writing a great deal of lectures, and tabulating everything together to make sure that it all tallies and that it's modernized. Some of the documents I received were in a rather shambolic condition, or were disordered or very old. So I had to sort of neaten them up and bring them up to date. And that's basically what I've been doing for the past 3-4 years.
Basically compilations too.
Essentially compilations, yeah.
You have to, yeah. Some of those old manuscripts, I bet you'd have to do something like that.
Goodness, I mean, there's lots of translation work into English. I seem to have a better talent of translating foreign languages into English rather than the other way around. So I've used that meager talent that I have to make sure that rituals are available. But also because I've been a ritualist my whole life, lots of the terminology and the systems are very familiar to me. There is a sort of common theme amongst these various rites when you study them in tandem. And that's helped a great deal. But basically, it was to make sure that my brothers and sisters have the things that they need in the right place and in the right way, so they can get on to using the tradition instead of just reading about it. There's nothing worse than armchair mysticism. Yeah. One should practice for it to come alive. And they always say that the rituals, the mysteries, are half written and half concealed, half visible, half concealed. Because when you practice something, the purpose of each part of the ritual is revealed through experiencing it in real life, in real time. As a Kabbalist would say, you have to bring the 4 worlds, the 3 worlds down into Asaya. You have to bring the rest of the 9 Sephirot down into Malkuth for it to be manifest in the kingdom. And that's essentially what a ritual does. It manifests the divine will in all of its various patterns and geometries down into our bodies and into our space, so that we can anchor it and naturally have a reaction to it and learn what it is consciously. But that's the idea.
Any plans for any more books? Have you? I
think I probably will. I'm not making any. I'm not making any commitments right now, but no. I've written an awful lot of books for the order. I do have a couple of books planned, perhaps for elements of the Egyptian rite. The book I always recommend to people is by Milko Bogard, which explores the Egyptian rite beautifully. He's done some amazing research. It can't be topped. I wouldn't even attempt it. The guy's incredible. He's a great Facebook friend, very, very clever guy. And he's done a lot for the history of Memphis, Mizraim, and helping people to understand how these complex bits of things have come together. So my contribution would be much more modest, and I think really about the practical side of actually performing the rituals and how they affect you. I think that's what people kind of need some reassurance on. So I see that as my role, is just sort of shepherding people along the middle path and not panicking too much about anything else. So my books will be in that vein. That's all I can actually admit.
Well, no, but I have heard from a lot of people that have been involved in different aspects of fraternalism that they learn a lot about themselves.
Yes.
What you learned about yourself in Freemasonry, specifically the Egyptian Masonic Order of the UK, what have you learned?
Oh, so that's an incredible question. That's how long is a piece of string? I have learned many, 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 many things. First of all, I've learned that people are very fragile. Mm-hmm. I've learned that people often don't understand that the way that they see the world can be very different to how somebody standing next to them sees it. Ooh. And that the most important thing is bridging that gap in a way that doesn't alienate people. But I've also learned, because I've had to take the leadership role in this order, I've also learned that leadership is a constant state of compromise. You can never please everybody, and you have to be responsible for the things that the right and the people who've bequeathed it to you expect you to take care of. And of course, to cultivate people in a way that helps them to grow is like parenting. It's incredibly difficult because it's different for each person. So I've learned to take things organically and not to mix up the symbol and the meaning of what the symbol represents. And that's with people too. People are living symbols. And sometimes we can misinterpret how they are and who they are and get ourselves into a right muddle. And of course, people do it to you as well. I mean, I'm a person of color, so naturally I'm used to my symbol and my reality being completely divorced from each other in terms of how I perceive. But for me, I see that as a human thing. And one of the things I love about the Egyptian rite, Masonry in general, is that it gives you tools to get beyond those perceptions and those assumptions and find real meaning in who you are without actually any form of disingenuity or dissociation. And that's what it's given me, is a sense of my own self. My Jed pillar, as the Egyptians would say, is much better for having been in the mysteries than not having. You know, as a person of color, as a gay man, as an occultist, as a creative, it's given me so many things that perhaps I knew in my heart might be true, but it's confirmed. And I think everybody's in that position. And that's, I think, the basis for compassion and communion, is that everybody is fighting to climb out of the water.
Well, Mr. Rose, I really appreciate your time today. This has been wonderful. I hope to get back sometime to further discuss this kind of thing. And you, all the best to you and the
Thank you.
Egyptian Masonic Order of the UK, sir. All the best in your expansion efforts as well.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Was Darren Rose, brothers and sisters, shedding some light on the Egyptian Masonic Order of the UK. What do you think? Okay. I'm going to reiterate something I've said before. There is something for everybody in fraternalism, right? From the person who just wants to take a degree and then get on with their fraternal journey, contributing to their lodge and their community. But there's also something for the people who want to take their fraternal journey a little deeper. And you can go as deep as you want within the craft. Okay, let's be blunt. And you've seen that time again. You've seen that manifest itself with the segments I've done on not just Freemasonry, but other organizations, okay? You've heard my guest today, right, talk about how deep you can go. I love the fact, first of all, that he's amalgamating some of the different rites and rituals of Freemasonry, for some of their ancient secrets and stuff. He's bringing that together in this organization. And you've heard different guests here on Points of Light Radio discuss the different aspects of Freemasonry, such as alchemy, the occult, etc. But Mr. Rose really shed quite a bit more light on that. I mean, but there again, he only scratched the surface. You've only just scratched the surface of what the Egyptian Masonic Order of the United Kingdom is all about, right? And I do hope, as I told you in the introduction, that you used your spiritual discernment as you were watching and listening to this particular segment, because some things are spiritually discerned. What you might call, hey man, that's a little fruity. No, with some people, it's of interest to them, right? And that's what Points of Light Radio is here to do, is to bring those different fraternal organizations to you, shed some light on them, right? Have you ever heard of, there again, of the Egyptian Masonic Order of the United Kingdom? Even many Masons have never heard of this, I guarantee you, right? And that's what we're here to do on Points of Light Radio, as I said. And last of all, didn't you love that guy? I mean, I love his passion for the order. I love the fact that he's there researching. He's really done a lot for the craft. And we will definitely have to have him back on here. Unfortunately, as I always say, that's all I have time for today. But before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. And I also welcome your comments and input. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, this has been interesting, hasn't it? Until we meet again, just step into the light.